debt. I sipped my drink and watched the lazy Texas sunset. Man, I'm going to miss him. I'm not going to miss the summer heat, but there's something about standing in my backyard wearing just shorts and a t-shirt in November that I could get used to. Oh, and the smell of Texas BBQ. Damn, my mouth is already watering. Turning around, I looked back at the family picnic going on behind me. The meeting was arranged in my honor, in honor of my recent appointment to the position of head of the workshop. It was an adult party, and half a dozen company employees and their spouses were there without their children. I was grateful for this because I had every intention of making this my going-away party. When I had the opportunity, I walked over to my truck. I took what I thought I would need as a visual aid. I suspected they would ask me to give a speech, and I wanted to make it memorable. I tucked my 9mm Glock into the back of my jeans and made sure it wasn't visible under my tuxedo. As I made my way back through the crowd of guests, I saw my boss heading towards me. Tommy Peterson was a big, fat guy with a smile that could light up half of Dallas. Even at over 50 years old, there was a sense of solidity about the man that both demanded respect and reassured you. Walking next to him was Martha, his wife, my problem. Okay, maybe she wasn't the problem. Maybe she's just an idiot who keeps opening the damn door and letting in the real problem. Anyway, it didn't really matter. I'll take care of that today. Martha Peterson was more than a little on the heavy side, but she still looked decent, even in her 50s. She had such a peculiarity that attracted people to her and made her a mother or grandmother to almost everyone. The problem was that she believed in the old wives' tale. Mama knows best. Since I moved here 11 months ago, she has made it her life's mission to set me up with the perfect woman. It didn't matter what I did or what I said, she just couldn't get it into her head that I was just not interested in dating. I'm still trying to get over my first marriage. Maybe if I had screamed or thrown some sort of tantrum, she would have gotten the hint. But it's just not for me. I try to be quiet, polite, and secretive. I guess if I was a bigger ass, well, that's about to change. On the side where Martha and several other women were sitting, everyone was just beaming, like cats that had caught a mouse. They found their perfect girl for me, and here she is, sitting with them. She was beautiful, barely 5 feet tall, but with a good figure, long blonde hair, and a very pretty face. Of course, she always looked great because she worked in a beauty salon. I had to give them credit. I, too, thought she was the perfect girl for me. About 2 years ago, unfortunately, the ideal girl they had been pushing on me for the last couple of months was my ex-wife, Teresa. The fact that they knew about this is what really burned my ass. I didn't tell them the real story of my divorce because it was none of their damn business. I told them I didn't want to date her or talk to her or even be in the same state as her. Now she sat there, surrounded by a group of women who were extremely pleased with themselves for finally coming face-to-face with my ex-wife. Teresa probably didn't tell them much about how our marriage ended because she tended to leave out little things when she didn't want to deal with problems. There was something about her that charmed almost everyone she met. She told them that she had made a mistake and that I refused to talk to her and forgive her. She played the role of the broken and saddened wife perfectly. That and her, "I'm praying for a chance to show Doug how much I really love him," routine had Martha and her bachelorette party eating out of her hand. Tommy stood up, addressed the group, and finally introduced me. So the show has begun. I'd like to thank you all for coming tonight. I know this was supposed to be a celebration, and I guess in some ways it is. Tommy offered me the job of shop manager, and I want to thank him for that. But, sir, I'll have to decline because as of today, I quit. Sorry to put this on you, and I understand if you don't want to give me a good reference, but I'm leaving tomorrow, no matter what happens. I watched the horrified faces as Tommy opened his mouth to say something. "Doug, this is a party in my house," he said sternly. "No disrespect to you, sir. You've been more than honest with me, and I owe you an explanation. But there are others here," I said coldly, "to whom I sure as hell don't owe anything." "Doug," asked Martha. "Martha, I think you and the rest of your little coven have caused me more than enough problems. I've made it very clear that I don't want to date anyone. And I've made it damn clear that I don't want to be anywhere near my ex-wife. Obviously, what I want doesn't matter, so I'll either talk now or leave forever. It's your choice, and right now, either one will be good enough for me. The group was silent except for Teresa's crying. Okay, then I'll tell you a little story. Teresa looked at me and slowly shook her head, her eyes pleading with me not to continue. You see, about 2 years ago, I left my small hometown in Georgia for the first time in my life. I left behind a broken marriage and a family that had turned their backs on me. I came here 11 months ago, trying to start a new life, but it seems I can't get rid of my past. It just keeps finding me through others. I stared at Martha until she looked away. I married my high school sweetheart 5 years ago. She was everything I ever wanted or dreamed of. We got married after she graduated, and for 3 years I thought we had the perfect marriage. She worked at a beauty salon, and I worked at one of my family's garages. My dad owns several garages throughout North Georgia, so that's where I learned to be a mechanic. But just as there was a serpent in the Garden of Eden, there was a serpent in my marriage. Unfortunately, that serpent turned out to be my little brother Billy. Billy is 3 years younger than me, but he's always been the center of attention in my family. He's supposedly a recovering drug addict, and has been since he was 15 and dropped out of school. My whole life, my parents took care of him, sacrificed themselves and me for what was best for Billy. I heard, Doug, we have to help him. He's sick. More times than I can count. So, 3 years ago, when I heard that he had been evicted from his last dump, I was not surprised. My family, including my wife, wanted him to stay with us until he was placed in another rehab clinic. My answer wasn't just no, but hell no. Both my wife and my parents were shocked and appalled that I was so cold and turned my back on my brother. In my opinion, I wasn't turning my back on him, I was just not giving him the opportunity to ruin my life. However, over the next few weeks, they made my life a living hell, pressuring me until I agreed to let Billy come and stay. And what did I get for trying to be a good big brother? I stared at my ex-wife, trying to calm down. I'm not sure what piece of crap my shitty brother fed to my wife to get her to spread her legs for him, but it worked. Of course, no one ever bothered to tell me about it. 2 months later, I got great news. Dear, I'm pregnant. Like an idiot, I was ecstatic since we had been trying to have a baby for the past year. Imagine my surprise a few months later when the doctor told us that there was something wrong with the baby, that the baby had a small heart defect, which is common in women who use cocaine. My wife, of course, denied that when I was using drugs. Then the doctor said something that turned my world into a nightmare. He said there had been studies that showed drug abuse didn't have to come from the mother. Early studies showed that a drug addict's semen could cause birth defects. I started to get angry. He asked me if I used drugs. When I told him no, he said birth defects were still a mystery and there had to be another reason. My wife, whom I trusted more than anyone in this world, told me that I was the father of the child. But everything didn't work out as it should. When the baby was born, they performed an operation. It was a complete success. But I'm not a complete fool, so I did a DNA test. When the results came, they gave the final answer, I was the uncle. I lost everything. I threw all my cheating wife's things out of the house, grabbed my Glock, and went looking for this piece of shit I once called my brother. I looked everywhere but couldn't find him anywhere. My parents sent him to some out-of-state clinic. So how did they find out? Well, that was another little kick in the groin. Turns out my brother had been waiting a whole week before telling them that I had become a problem in my older brother's life. Then the 4 of them sat on their asses, hoping that I would never find out their little secret. I filed for divorce the next day. As soon as my slut wife was served, there was a constant stream of crap from her and my parents. I didn't talk to the cheating slut for weeks. I couldn't look at her or even hear her voice. I was in shock. All my dreams were shattered. I was deceived and deceived by those who claimed to love me. After a week of non-stop crap from my parents, I agreed to talk to her. I heard all her excuses. Her brother was depressed and said he had nothing to live for. She felt sorry for him. She was just trying to console him, and it went too far. The weed they smoked clouded her mind. It was just one night, it was just mercy sex and didn't mean anything. It seems that their first attempt was so unsuccessful that he started talking about suicide again. The second time, she gave him back the will to live again. My ex-wife tried to earn sainthood by giving herself to a strange man. It makes me wonder if she visited shelters for homeless people and spread her holiness among them. I spat out the bile that had accumulated in my mouth. Teresa continued to sit and cry quietly. And although both Teresa and my parents attacked me like flies on shit, they were not alone. They hired others to talk to me. My favorite part was when the pastor of the church my family had attended for generations paid me a visit. My family donated heavily to the church and financed many of their building projects. He went on and on about forgiveness. After a while, I got tired of it, and I agreed to forgive, but on two conditions. The first was that on Sunday he would preach a sermon on how sinful it is to lust after your brother's wife. Secondly, next Sunday I must appear before the entire congregation and give my testimony before publicly forgiving them. I smiled, remembering his reaction, and I never heard from him again. Of course my parents just kept pushing, I growled. I heard all their expected bullshit. I should be more humane. Teresa made a mistake, but she has a good heart. My wife and child needed me, and a real man would not leave them. They raised me not to be so callous. They pressured more and more. My father finally told me how disappointed he was in me for not forgiving Teresa and Billy. I told them both how disappointed I was in them as parents. Then I hit them with both guns and said exactly what I think of them. It was very ugly. Finally, when they asked me if I had read my brother's apology letter and that I shouldn't blame Billy because he was sick, I lost them again. I said I wiped my ass with his letter. I also said them so that they would never mention my brother's name to me again. They didn't believe me, so I decided to convince them. I stared at my audience to make sure I had their full attention. Reaching behind my back, I pulled out my Glock. There were a few gasps and more than a few curses. I thanked God that I was in Tommy and Martha's house. Usually when you pull out a gun in Texas, you get shot in the ass. But I knew that Martha forbade bringing any weapons into her house, so I would be the only one who had one. The arsenal that my colleagues usually carried usually remained in their trucks or other vehicles. I lowered my voice to a menacing growl and continued. I remember you had the same reaction as my parents. I remember the words I told them that day. If you mention that bastard's name to me one more time, I'll hunt the son of a bitch down and put a bullet in his fucking head. I swear to God, you'll bury your beloved son within a week. I paused to watch the color drain from several people's faces. I expressed my point of view. Obviously, my parents believe me because they haven't spoken to me since that day. It's a shame I can't say the same about my ex-wife. I thought I might really hurt someone if I stayed there any longer, so I moved across the state line to Alabama to wait out my divorce. I left Teresa and the baby everything except a few dollars that I needed to start all over again. I guess I should thank God that it took her 6 months to find me. I heard she had some kind of nervous breakdown and had to be hospitalized. Looks like she tried to commit suicide and failed. It was similar to how she tried to remain faithful to her husband, as they say. Even tobacco is at hand, but you won't smoke. I stared at Teresa as she covered her face with her hands. Her shoulders heaved as she sobbed. I wish I could tell you that I felt sorry for her, but I didn't. She made me who I am today by ripping my heart out. All that remains is the pain from my past and the rage I have to fight to control myself every day. Over the past 2 years, I have found myself unable to move on. The fact that Teresa kept following me didn't help. She always said that we were soulmates, destined to be together all the time. I thought it was pretty stupid, like she'd read it somewhere and just like the sound of it. Now I very much doubt her words. I have never felt so alone, as if some part of me was missing. I find myself sometimes looking for her next to me, wanting to ask what she thinks. At times I even reached out to her hand, but she was never there. I felt my heart getting colder and my anger growing every time this happened. Before this, she was always by my side. I remembered my graduation, My dad wasn't there because Billy was in trouble again. Dad went to the police station to pick him up and talk to the judge. My mom was so worried, she was desperate, so I told her to just go and join Dad. So my graduation party was only attended by my friends and some family members, but no one from my immediate family. I tried to hide my disappointment, but Teresa saw through me immediately. She made me feel loved that night, more than once. It truly was my special night. I woke up in the middle of the night after a party, lying in my bed with her naked body pressed against me. I noticed that my parents were standing in the doorway and looking at us. I slowly stood up, put on my boxers, and walked to my bedroom door. My father wanted to say something about Teresa being there, but he changed his mind. My mother had tears in her eyes. They both whispered their apologies to me for missing my party. I lied and told them it wasn't a big deal. I remember telling them that I would soon be moving out and moving in with my cousin until Teresa and I got married. Then I slammed the door in their faces. My attention returned to my audience as a couple of people began to stand. I cleared my throat and shook my head. They quickly sat back down. I carefully placed my Glock next to me and heard a sigh of relief. After looking at them, I continued my story. When she finally found me, she moved into the same trailer park I was living in. After I got a restraining order against her and still filed about a dozen more complaints, I knew I needed to move again. The divorce finally went through, so I packed up and moved here to Texas. She didn't mention the little fact of the restraining order when she told you her sob story about our marriage, did she, Martha? Martha had already started to cry and shook her head. I thought so. She's pretty good at overlooking the little important details. When I came to Texas, I was lucky to find someone like Tommy who helped me start over. He gave me a chance to prove myself and didn't really pry into my past. I made it clear that I didn't want to talk about my past, and after he was satisfied that I was not running from the law, he agreed to it. Again, it's a shame that his wife didn't listen to him. I didn't tell anyone where I was moving, not even a couple of friends I still have in Georgia. So imagine my surprise when 3 months ago, my ex-wife moved into town. Even more joyful was that my boss's wife decided to try to bring me and my cheating ex-wife together again. Martha started to say something, but I interrupted her. You had your chance, but you damned well never listened. Now it's my turn, I blurted out with enough fury to silence her. I've made it clear a shitload of times over the last year that I don't want to date, and I don't want to discuss or explain my past. I'm damn sure I didn't want to get back with my wife, but obviously what I want doesn't mean a damn thing. Martha sobbed. Doug, I'm so sorry, I didn't know. I immediately cut her off. Don't know, I spat. Since when do you have to know before you respect someone else's privacy? Who the hell do you think you are that someone has to explain something to you before you do them the usual courtesy and don't bother the hell in his life? I could tell my words were on target. It's time to end this sad little show. So, Martha, I want to thank you and the other annoying women for making my last 2 months a living hell. I would wish you well, but that would be a blatant lie. Personally, I hope you all turn your back on each other and make each other's lives miserable. I looked down and saw Teresa's face streaked with tears. Please, baby, please, she begged. Please give me another chance. I told you to get the hell away from me, Teresa. Go home to your baby. I can't until I bring his daddy with me. You want to find the baby's father? Go look in some rehab center or some ditch. If you meant me, then it will never happen. If you haven't been following our little story, I'm damn sure that I am not the father of this child. I picked up my Glock, tucked it back into my belt, and turned to walk through the crowd. They spread out faster than the legs of a trailer bum at a NASCAR party. I heard several apologies, and some even looked me in the eyes. As I reached the driveway, I heard Teresa scream behind me. No! Doug, wait! Please don't go! I can't live without you, Doug! She screamed, falling to the ground and sobbing. You have to come home, you just have to... I turned around and looked at her. Listen, bitch, I don't give a damn if you put a razor to your wrists or not. Just stay away from me. I saw that everyone was staring at me. I still can't seem to get anyone to listen to me, I growled and walked to my truck. Teresa. The doctors say that writing down my thoughts is good therapy and will help me discover myself. Personally, I think this is complete crap. They don't seem to understand that I lost my Doug. He is my rock, my soulmate, my lover, my best friend, and until recently, my husband. I lost him because of one stupid mistake. A mistake he can't forgive me for. To understand us, you need to know our past. Doug and I started dating in high school. He was a sophomore and I was just a freshman. I knew I loved him from the moment we first kissed. We went through high school together and I knew we would eventually get married. 3 months after I graduated from school, we got married. I'm sure my parents were delighted. Firstly, they were glad that I left their house, and secondly, because I got married. Like good Southern Baptists, I think they were afraid I would get sick. My parents and I always quarreled. They loved Doug, but they didn't like my lifestyle. Sex and drinking were too indecent for them. Of course, they knew that I would never have sex with anyone other than Doug. He was everything I ever wanted. He was always the one I considered my soulmate. Even when I screwed up, it had nothing to do with my love for him, although he doesn't look at it that way. All he sees is betrayal. He doesn't understand that when I see him in pain, I die too. Doug has always been my rock. Whenever I lost control, he was always there. Most people think he's shy and quiet, but I know better. That he is actually a volcano. He's always calm on the outside, but on the inside, he can just build and build until he explodes. I've seen this happen a few times, but rarely in public. One day, this happened in front of a group of our classmates. We went to a beer party and were drinking when this asshole, Jerry Whitmore, grabbed my ass. I turned around and slapped him. Then this drunk idiot grabbed me and tried to grope me. He must have been dying to do this in front of Doug. Even though Doug is not the biggest guy, he is strong and in very good shape. Jerry didn't even have time to throw a punch before Doug knocked him to the ground, sat on him, and began punching him in the face. It took 3 guys to pull Doug off him. Doug beat him up pretty bad, and there was talk of filing charges. But then I threatened to press charges of sexual assault against Jerry, and all questions were dropped. Needless to say, I never had any problems with any other guy after that. As I said earlier, Doug and I got married right after I graduated from high school. It was the happiest time I can remember. He was already working as a mechanic in one of his father's garages, and I went to school for hairdressing. Soon, we had enough money to buy our first home. It wasn't that big, just a little matchbox house with 2 bedrooms, but it was our house. The first 2 years were difficult because we didn't have much money, but we lived for each other, and that was more than enough. I was so happy that it seemed like I was living in some kind of fairy tale. Doug and I may not have had a perfect marriage, but sometimes it seemed to me that it was. If we argued, I would then sulk or cry, and most of the time he would give up. I didn't do this very often. I didn't want to use my Doug. Our love was like a protective wall around us, protecting us from the outside world. This is probably why I never noticed the danger until it was too late. When Billy was evicted from his trailer, we started having problems. He had nowhere to stay as he was quarreling with his parents at the time. Even though they didn't want him to stay with them again, they also didn't want him to stay on the streets. They asked us if he could stay with us for a few weeks until they could transfer him to another rehab center. I agreed, but Doug said no. I knew that Doug had a lot of problems with his family, and most of the time, he had a right to be angry. Doug's parents, Tom and Paula, are pretty decent people. They were just unlucky enough to have a son who was a complete mess. This mess tore their family apart and then killed mine. Billy was always loud, the one who would do almost anything on a dare, whereas Doug, on the other hand, was that quiet force that was always in the background, but you always knew it was there. Together, they were a team. This continued until Doug entered high school. In high school, Doug began to socialize more with his friends and football teammates. Billy responded by becoming even more of an attention seeker. It soon became obvious that Billy would try to become a bad boy, or some sort of rebel. It's not surprising that he started hanging out with drug addicts. By this time, Doug and I were already dating. and I knew that Doug was torn apart as he watched Billy fall into that hole. Billy was a full-blown drug addict by the time he was a freshman. By that time, he had already disappointed the family quite a lot. He dropped out the same year Doug graduated from high school. The parents tried everything but did not know what to do with Billy. They tried cajoling, bribing, threatening, and finally tried some tough love. Billy just used it as an excuse to quit school. After that, Tom and Paula ended up giving in to him on almost everything. While I was trying to understand the problem, their entire lives began to depend on Billy. They did everything for him and essentially left Doug to fend for himself most of the time. I know it really hurt Doug. Billy was simply obsessed with the desire to ruin his life. It was too bad because he could have been something special. My Doug is a good-looking guy, but everyone agrees that Billy would be more handsome as he grows up. Unfortunately, this may not happen due to his drug addiction. Doug tried several times to reach Billy. In response, Billy wanted only one thing: to rob his brother and their parents, and then buy more drugs. When Billy turned 18, Doug stopped trying. We had been married about 2.5 years when Billy was evicted. I admit that Tom, Paula, and I were pretty relentless in trying to get Doug to change his mind. I think Tom and Paula felt they had no choice, and I think they needed to ease their guilt. They didn't want Billy to come back and live with them again. They just kicked him out a few months ago after he stole a lot of money from them. I wanted Doug to change his mind, because you can't just turn your back on your family. And besides, Christmas was coming, and it would be a terrible holiday if Billy lived on the streets. It was just a few days after Christmas when I let my fairy tale marriage fall apart. Doug called and told me he was trying to fix a transmission for a middle-aged single mother and 3 kids out there in town. It was her only car, so he and another guy were going to work all night to fix it for her. Damn, I love him. That evening, I returned home late from the beauty salon. When I entered the house, I almost threw up. The smoke from Billy's weed was like fog. I went up and knocked on the bedroom door, but he didn't answer me. Angry, I opened a few windows and then went to take a shower. After the shower, I got ready for bed. I could still smell the smoke, but I needed to close the windows because it was cold outside. Closing the windows, I went and knocked on Billy's door again. This time, he answered. The way he looked scared me. His eyes were bright red, and I couldn't tell if it was from the smoke or if he was crying. He had such a look of despair and despondency that I really began to worry about him. He turned around, walked back to the bed, and sat down on the floor next to his bong. I walked in and immediately felt a rush of smoke. I smoked weed sometimes, so I was familiar with what it did to me. I went to get a fan and brought it back to the room. Then she opened the window and turned on the fan so that it began to blow out the smoke. Billy just sat there muttering something. When I finished, I sat down next to him. Even though that night was a blur, I'm sure I remember how it all happened. I remember that I started pestering him. Damn it, Billy, I said. If Doe smells this when he gets home, he'll kick your ass. Maybe that would be for the best, he muttered. When I looked at him, I saw such sadness. It was like he had given up. Damn it, it doesn't matter anyway, he sighed, throwing his head back and looking at the ceiling. I'm still dying. I was shocked. It took me a few seconds to answer. Oh my gosh, Billy, do you have AIDS? He snorted and shook his head. No, I hate needles, but there is another way to get what proves I'm dying. He looked at me and must have noticed my confusion. With a deep, sad sigh, he answered my unspoken question. Damn, he began. Even with some of the sluts I hang out with, I couldn't get AIDS that way if I tried. He sat and looked at me until it finally dawned on me what he meant. When this happened, and I couldn't believe it. I mean, damn, he just turned 19. Did you want to go to the doctor? Yes. He nodded. He said it was because of the drugs. Damn, I got tested for STDs and AIDS, but it's not a big deal now, is it? Usually I can't lift it, and when I do, I can't keep it tense for a very long time. I can barely scrape together enough money to feed my habit, so buying some little blue pills is unlikely. Hell, if I can't be a real man, I might as well call it quits, so being kicked out by my lucky older brother doesn't really mean shit. We sat in silence for several minutes. I'm ashamed that I started thinking about ways to help, most of which I knew Doug wouldn't approve of. "Doug is really unlucky. He just works too hard," I said. "That's not what I was talking about," he muttered. Billy looked at me with tears in his eyes. "What then?" I asked quietly. "I was talking about you," he whispered. I know I blushed, and she turned her head away so he wouldn't see it. "Doug has always been lucky to have you. You give him the strength to do what he needs. If it weren't for you, he'd be just as big of a loser as I am. So yeah, he's lucky. If only I'd found someone like you, everything would be different." He put his head in his hands and sighed. I know he stroked my ego. At least now I understand it. Then, well, everything is a blur. I think it was smoke, as the room was still quite thick. If I could do it again, I would have gotten up and left right there. But I didn't. What I did opened the door to the end of my marriage. I looked at him and saw a broken child, someone who had no reason to live. My heart broke when I saw his pain. I reached out, hugged him, and pressed him to me. He laid his head on my shoulder and I gently stroked his hair. After a few minutes, he reached out and gently touched my cheek and then kissed me tenderly. "Billy," I whispered, "you do not have to." "Please, Teresa," he begged quietly. "I've never kissed a good woman before. Please." I know I should have stopped it right there, but I froze. I didn't kiss him back, but I didn't stop him either. He kissed me again, hugged me, and hugged me tightly. I didn't answer. I think he thought my lack of reaction was a green light. His kisses became more and more passionate while his hands caressed me under my t-shirt. "Billy," I whispered, "please, Teresa, I need a reason to live." Was this a phrase to pity me? Of course it was, but I really believed that he was on the verge of despair. Whether I was high or just overwhelmed by the moment, I didn't get up, scream, kick, or do what I had to do if I wanted to fight for my marriage. Instead, I just sat there, confused, torn about what I should do. After he stroked me for a minute, he slowly pushed me back onto the floor. I wasn't fully prepared for it, and I was a little uncomfortable. I felt that he had problems. It soon became apparent that Billy would not be able to finish the job. He leaned back in his chair, and I remembered that I had never seen such an exhausted face before. He actually started crying. That's when I made my decision. I remember thinking the damage had been done. I had let Billy cross a line that Doug would never forgive. Even though I didn't make love to Billy, I didn't stop him from having sex with me either. Since I had already crossed the line, I decided that something good had to come out of this. I reached out and gently touched Billy. "Come here," I said quickly. I took his hand as we stood up and pushed him onto the bed. I took off my clothes. He just lay on his back, calmly looking at me. I did everything to make him strong enough for me to take him. This was not making love. There were no gentle words or touches. "They will be saved for my husband." It was just sex. I won't tell you that I didn't enjoy it, but it wasn't the incredible sex I usually had with my Doug. When it was all over, I lay on him, breathing heavily. I heard him whispering, gasping for breath. "Thank you. Thank you. Oh God. Thank you." I lay there knowing I had achieved something. I gave hope to someone who didn't have it. Do you know what it's like? This is an incredible feeling. I rolled off Billy and stood up. It was at that moment that I came back to reality, the scale of my betrayal hitting me right in the face. I quickly grabbed my clothes and headed towards the bedroom door. Billy called out to me, "Teresa?" I turned and stared at him as tears began to fill my eyes. "Never again, Billy," I said quietly. "This will never happen again, and Doug must never find out. Do you understand me? He must not find out, ever." Billy nodded and leaned back on the bed. He covered his face with his hands, and I think I heard him cry. I went and took another shower. I tried to clean myself outside. Deep down, I tried to justify my actions, but I couldn't. I didn't mean to cheat on Doug, but that's how he would have taken it. The fact that this happened to his brother would kill him. That night, I cried myself to sleep. I knew I had changed us forever. The next morning, Doug was furious. The smell of weed was still noticeable. He almost threw Billy out right then and there. Why he didn't do this, I'm not entirely sure. I was confused, still trying to get my emotions under control so Doug wouldn't think something was wrong. That night I made love to my dog like there was no tomorrow. In a way, I was afraid that this might be the case. When he asked, I told him that I had a nightmare that he left me. Doug was so kind and gentle with me that night. My dog was mine and I was his again. I would never do something so stupid again. Over the next few weeks, I noticed Billy watching me, but he never tried to talk to me alone again. He moved out 3 weeks later. 2 weeks after he moved out, I discovered that I was pregnant. Doug and I were delighted. Honestly, I never believed the baby wasn't Doug's. I mean, we've had a very active sex life since we got married. So, I figure we've done this at least 25 times since I've been with Billy. It wasn't until Billy asked me if he could be the father that I started to worry. Much to my anger and embarrassment, I learned that Billy had already confessed to Tom and Paula what had happened. They weren't happy, but they didn't throw me to the wolves either. After talking with them, we decided to let our secret die and pray that Doug never found out. I was sick. I'd never hidden anything from Doug before, but I knew it would destroy him. Every night I prayed that the child would be his and he would never find out. The day the doctor said something was wrong with the baby, I realized that my prayers had not been answered. The doctor said that the defect can be corrected surgically. But, depending on how bad it was, they may have to do surgery right after he's born. When he said that this birth defect was related to drug abuse, my heart stopped beating. He asked me if I was taking drugs, and I told him absolutely not. He then asked Doug the same thing and said that they had studies showing that if the father was a drug user, that could also cause defects. I almost died right there. Doug began to unravel until the doctor told him that when it comes to birth defects, they don't know anything for sure. But I immediately realized that the seed of doubt had been sown. Over the next few months, I tried to reassure Doug that the baby was his, without letting him know that there was a chance it wasn't. He never came directly and asked. I knew I was clinging to just a glimmer of hope that the baby was really Doug's, but there were no other options. After the birth of the child, all hell broke loose. Doug did a DNA test and found out that Billy was the father. That day, he threw my things out of the house. Unsurprisingly, my parents disowned me, and I ended up moving in with Doug's parents. Doug didn't even talk to me for 2 weeks. He finally agreed to meet me after being harassed by his parents every day for almost a week. I knew our conversation would be one-sided, but I had to get my husband to listen to me. He needed to see how sorry I was, and how much I needed him. I begged and pleaded, pouted and screamed and cried. I'd stand on my head if I thought it would make Doug listen and understand. He is truly my life, my love, my soulmate. I tried everything I could think of, but my husband just wouldn't listen. I begged him to forgive me and told him it was just a terrible mistake. I explained that it was just mercy sex, and it didn't mean anything. I even told him the honest truth that it wasn't nearly as good as when we did it. However, I received almost no response. All he could tell me was, "You slept with my brother and had his baby." Over the next week, his parents and I tried everything to get him to sit down and talk to us, to try to find a way to deal with it. Billy even wrote him a letter, trying to explain everything and apologies. I am not blind, and I saw how my husband changed because we constantly harassed him. I could see Doug's anger and frustration building. If you want to know something about a person, look into his eyes. The more they squint, the closer he gets to an explosion. But I had no other choice because he simply did not want to listen to me. I called him 15 times a day and came to his work a couple of times a day. Do you think I was stalking Doug? Yes, I think that's how it is. But I never stopped fighting if it was about something important, and nothing was more important to me than my Doug. When he finally spoke to me, I almost regretted having this conversation. He started with the words slut and bitch, and then it got worse. By the time he finished, he called me every last name. He ended up taking my wedding ring off while I sat there petrified by his words. I've seen my husband's rage before, but it was never directed at me. Now I was the target of his rage, and it scared the hell out of me. Around the same time, Tom and Paula told me it's best to leave things as they are, and stopped helping me. Doug told them something that really shook them up. Like I said, his rage can be very scary at times. I lost him when he moved to Alabama. For the first time, I thought about my life without my Doug. She was gloomy and cold, and there was no hope or joy in her. The man I loved hated me. That night, I mixed a bottle of sleeping pills with a fifth of Jack Daniels. The next day, I woke up in the hospital with my head splitting from pain and in a suicide watch unit. The doctor said I started calling people after Doug no longer returned my calls. Apparently, they found me in time and pumped out my stomach. After that, Doug Jr., as I named my child, moved in with Tom and Paula. I'm not allowed to be around him too often. I wish I could say it bothers me, but it doesn't. The baby is my fault, just a painful reminder that I don't have my husband. Treatment took some time, but I was able to track down Doug in Alabama after I left the hospital. I moved into the small trailer park where he lived. Needless to say, he was not thrilled to meet me. I got a job at a local beauty salon and settled into my normal lifestyle. Work. Call Doug. Work. Visit Doug. Work. Call Doug. Soon, the police from Alabama visited me. I had to change my routine a little when Doug got a restraining order against me. But I didn't stop trying to talk to him. I couldn't leave him alone because if I did, I would lose him completely. Around this time, Doug received a divorce. I think when the judge found out that the baby was his brother's, he decided we couldn't handle it. He just didn't know us very well. A couple of months after the divorce, Doug moved again. It took me 8 months to find him. He moved to Texas. This time, when I moved to be near him, I didn't put pressure on him like I had in the past. I met some ladies whose husbands and boyfriends worked with him. I told them some of the highlights of our relationship, mainly focusing on my desire to get back together with him. I never lied to them. I just didn't tell them everything. I got another job at a salon so I could be more careful this time. If you're wondering how I could find a job so quickly, the answer is simple. I'm pretty, I work pretty cheap, and I do a pretty good job. It took a little time to prepare, and Martha was able to see how much I loved him and how sorry I was for ruining everything. I think she also saw how miserable Doug was, so even though he said he wasn't interested in talking to me, we all knew it was only a matter of time before he did. That time finally came at his party. What Martha and I had planned turned out to be the worst possible outcome. What started out as a promising night quickly turned into a bad evening. Doug told everyone his side of our story. He was short and very angry. I didn't dare interrupt him. I saw him squint. After he finished, I begged him to come home with me, but he told me to go and die. Then I finally realized that I had lost him forever. After the party, I became a sick wreck. Martha took me to the hospital, and a few days later I found myself here in an Atlanta hospital, again on suicide watch. You might be wondering about the baby. Well, I'm told things are going great. I haven't been around him since the first time I lost my temper. Tom and Paula are now taking care of him. They'll probably end up adopting him because, let's face it, I'm a shitty mother. What else can you call a woman who cannot calmly look at her own child? I know it sounds terrible, but every time I see him, I remember my mistake and everything it cost me. It's not the child's fault, I know, but it doesn't change anything. Does this make me a terrible person? Hell yes. In my eyes, it is. I think the doctors were right, and the treatment really helped me discover who I am. Of course, I'm sick of knowing who I am. I am a terrible wife and a terrible mother who has lost her only meaning in life. I'll probably have to hide this little note. Otherwise, the doctors will never let me out of here. They say they want you to be honest, but when you are honest, it scares them. I have no doubt that someday I will find a way to deal with this. I pray this happens soon. Debt. I stood on a California beach looking out over the Pacific Ocean. The nightmare I've been living in for the past few years is finally over. The ending actually came a few weeks after the party. I received a message from my cousin in Georgia that Teresa had committed suicide. I was numb. My life was like waiting for the Titanic to finally sink, hoping that everything would somehow get better, but knowing that this was impossible. I still loved her, but I could never go back to her. Now my life was free. I wrote 2 short notes, put them in a small black jewelry box, and sent them by registered mail to my parents. The first note was to my parents, saying that since Teresa had taken the easy way out, I knew they would be able to take care of my nephew financially after Billy and I retired from the game. I ended the letter by wishing them better luck in raising my nephew than they had in raising Billy and me. I addressed the small black box to my brother. Inside were 4 things: pieces of Teresa's and mine's wedding rings, 1 9mm bullet, and a note that simply said, "Run." It took me several weeks to catch up with him. I finally found him in a drug house in Atlanta. He lived there with his other drug addict friends. I won't forget his face when I put my Glock between his eyes. The stench in his room was nothing compared to the stench when he shit himself. "Please," he begged. "Kill me, Doug. I can't live with the guilt. I'm so sorry." Some might call it weakness, others might call it strength, but I couldn't pull the trigger. I took the cartridge out of the clip and threw it to him. "Do it yourself, you piece of shit. You won't ruin my life anymore. Go and waste your life." That was the last time I saw him, lying and crying in his own shit. I left Georgia that night knowing that I had burned all my bridges. I'll never go home again. This was a couple of weeks ago. This morning I received a message that Billy's body had been found. He died of an overdose. They also found a 9mm bullet clutched in his hand. This chapter of my life is over. Looking at the vast ocean, I noticed that there was no boat or ship on it as far as the eye could see. I felt a loneliness that matched the emptiness in my heart. How to continue to live without your soulmate. And I was just about to find out. Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one.